Welcome to LCS Talks. My name is Kevin Merchandani, and I'm the Director of Instruction for K-12. I am really excited to be joined by my co-host, Adam Wolders, our head of school at Langley Christian. And if you tuned in to our first episode with Adam Boren of Parallel Wealth, we were really excited to hear some practical tools and strategies with financial planning. And Adam really equipped us and helped us to think about stewardship and what that looks like to be purposely disciplined and break the silence around money and start to actually make sure that our finances are in line with God's intentions for being generous and faithful with what we've been given. And we're going to be joined by Lillian Cazacu, notary public, and he will be talking a bit about finances from a legacy gift kind of perspective. Adam Wolders, what are you excited to hear about in this episode ahead?
Well, I'm really excited about the conversation with Lillian because I think he's going to touch on the values that really shape us and how those values continue through the actions that we make with our finances. And that there is this real strong relationship between generosity, stewardship, thriving, and how we make decisions about our finances, both in the long term and the short term. And so I'm really excited to hear his perspective on that. And I think he's really going to challenge a lot of us.
Yeah, what I loved about both these two episodes was that we could be 18 years old all the way up to the post-retirement and get something super practical. And it just felt, I think I felt like a lot of sense of clarity and joy that came from these two gentlemen to hear their perspectives. So looking forward to this episode. Here is our talk with Lillian Kazaku. Lillian, you'll introduce a little bit of yourself. You're a notary public.
Yep.
And there's a number of different acronyms behind your name that I love. I'd love to unpack some of those because you're obviously a lifelong learner. And I think there's things that our community is going to be really equipped by
Yeah.
having
No.
opportunity to hear from you.
Thank you.
So,
Thank
yeah.
you for inviting me for sure. I'm a legal professional trained in Europe. And younger in my first life, so to speak. I was working towards my law degree. Then I got my master's degree in law. And on my third year of doctoral studies, I got my Canadian visa, and I'm like, okay, so I have to choose between finishing my PhD or just fly to Canada. And I think that was one of the most inspired decisions that I had.
That's a big commitment to drop in between. You've got the C, so you're a candidate.
Yeah.
That's a big choice.
So it's a PhD-C, right?
Yeah.
Yes, it's a PhD candidate. I've done my minimum of 3 years of doctoral studies,
Yeah.
and I had to just defend my dissertation, and I think I did the right choice.
Yeah.
So then I moved to Canada. We had just one daughter at that time, and we moved to Canada. I had to do some readjustment to education. A lot of things were not accepted, as you may know, and then I decided if I couldn't finish my law degree and be back in my legal background, so to speak, I went back to SFU and did another master's degree to become a notary, and the rest is history.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Lillian, tell us a little bit about your connection to Langley Christian School.
Yeah. So when we moved closer into Langley, we realized that Langley Christian is one of those hubs of Christian community. I heard a lot of good things about especially the community, actually. Yes. And then having 4 kids, now we have 2 already graduated, so 2 joining the alumni community, and 2 still. So the 2 that graduated, one is finishing 4th-year pre-med at Trinity, and the other one is doing business. And I have 2 more that grade 8 and 6 and 11.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, like, it is a joy to join the board a few years ago, and that's been, although you can be on many boards, I think this is the most important one, and that I can give back to both the Christian community and secondly to the Christian education, which is even, I think, more important.
Yeah. What's driving the work that you do? What's bringing you joy these days in the work of being a notary and
Mhm.
having kids at the school? Tell us a little bit about what God's doing in your life right now and
Yeah.
motivating you.
No, I think my passion is to make sure that I personally pass the legacy and look at how the next generation is being inspired by. Hopefully, I can give something. Normally you look at the next generation. You want the next generation to be better than us, right? So my hope in my job, in my as a parent, as a board director, as a leader, that whatever we do, hopefully inspires the next generation to do something, to take something from us. Obviously, they have their own identity. They do a lot of things on their own, especially at this age, right? But hopefully, there will be something that we say we do that will put in their baggage, and they say, "Hey, I got this from Dad, or I got this from Mr. Cazacu, or I got." So hopefully, the legacy. That's why estate planning that I do as a notary, right? So I call it now legacy planning because estate planning is just money passing through.
Yeah.
Legacy planning, adding some values in there. So pass those values as because if you pass just the money, it's kind of like passing the fish around. Fish can get bad, right? So pass the fishing rope and pass the skills, pass the legacies and values. Then you know your kids and your next generation and your clients and whoever you're talking to, they'll have some value when you're gone.
I'm hearing you say so far that this is more than just passing on money. It's more than just what you give to the next generation. Maybe just give us a bit of that deep dive into legacy, gifting of wills, and maybe even some of the biblical perspectives of what that looks like in the work that you do.
Yeah, personally, I'm working towards becoming a certified kingdom advisor. You're laughing at other acronyms behind my name, but
More learning.
this one maybe is the most important because kingdom advisors is a North American designation and structure of financial planners, lawyers, notaries that work with estate planning. And it's a designation focused on helping Christians manage money and estate planning through the lens of biblical wisdom. So through that journey, I've learned, I'm learning these core biblical. Although you're hearing that in church sometime, and I don't know. Like, by the way, do you know how many times in the Bible money and wealth is used? I know we know the do not
Yeah.
fear is 365, right? One for each day.
Totally.
But do you know, like approximately?
Yeah, I've done quite a bit of a dive into
Okay.
it. I'd say probably my best estimation is looking at, I mean, Gospel of Luke and Gospel of Matthew. It probably have 13 different more explicit references in there. Probably a third of Jesus's stories are
That's right.
really related. Like I'd
Mhm.
say, I mean, there's up for grabs what the percentage is, but yeah, Jesus talks a lot about money.
Jesus talks a lot, and if you even go through the Old Testament, I was surprised how many even proverbs that talk about wisdom with money and the test of your heart, because money is not just hey, be careful how you use your money, but it's actually the ultimate test of our faith. So it's 2,500, around 2,500. So if the not fear is 365, this is about 7 times more.
Wow.
So I was thinking, I was reflecting on that. I'm like, God knows that how we handle money is one of the biggest tests of our faith. So why would you put in a spiritual book 7 times more about money than about, let's say, do not fear? So that's why it made me kind of go that path, and I wanted to learn more, and I wanted to. I have a lot of clients that are Christians that I want to kind of pass that along and legacy, how you actually make your legacy in a way that help the organizations that you normally help during life. And by the way, there was a statistic that when I was working in Vancouver, we had a big charity that came to us, and they gave us some stats at that time about, I think they said about 87% of Canadian give during life, but in their will, only 5 to 6% give in their will to a charity.
Wow.
So that was something that made me look at why this is happening. But yes, I think if we understand the main principle, so I with this Kingdom Advisors curriculum, you learn the main principles. First, God owns it all. So if you go through especially Old Testament, you see that He is the ultimate owner. And if you have that attitude that He's the ultimate owner and we are the stewards who are managers of the estate, I mean, if you give your let's go, you go on vacation, I'm your manager, and you give me $50,000 to manage it. And if I have to pay something, and I'm just going, to buy some toys, so to speak, right? And you come back, and the money is all spent, right? So that's kind of how I feel that we should approach this, right? We and our bank statements are spiritual statements. So to make a test of our, spirituality, test on them once in a while your monthly statement. Where is the money going? As a notary public, I normally do this estate planning, and we go in, and unfortunately or fortunately, you kind of see where the family is at. It's kind of like a state of their spiritual state
Spiritual
at that
health
time.
even,
That,
probably, right?
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And and also, like, sometimes one of the principles is saying, especially Proverbs, about leaving too much to the next generation. It says that planning is a good thing
Mhm.
in many, many places, although there are psalms that says your plans may not be God's plans, but mostly the planning is a good principle. But last one is that leaving too much to the next generation, or planning too much, may sometimes may be having more harm than good for the next generation. If you give a lot of money without proper guidance, any principles, then not necessarily you'll help the next generation.
Yeah.
Lillian, are you finding that there's a difference in the conversations that you have between Christians and secular individuals in terms of how they think about their wealth and their money and planning for future generations?
Mm.
Are there some differences?
Well, I think I would divide in three categories, not two. So so the Christians, I would divide the Christian families in two as well. So there are Christians that really live their faith, and they're basically, you can give everything to spouse and then to children, but then charities are at least 10% or more. Like, I have people that after the kids, actually everything went to charity, right? They didn't care that much to give to siblings and nieces and nephews, because, like, they're all wealthy, right? Or they thought, I have more value giving into a church, a nonprofit organization, or like a school like ours, right? Um, and they have, people that not normally in the non-Christian, families. Maybe you have more, I don't know how to say, more complications. There are people that are estranged, and it's more complex estate planning, so to speak. So I won't go into that, but I would think, like, lately I don't see much difference in Christians, non-Christians. The wills or other estate planning plans are very similar. Very few, I would say, maybe 10% of the Christians actually are giving something into charity, or doing something more creative with their estate, that their kids will have the wealth, but also will have some guidelines. I recommend making some letters on a side of a will, and just make sure they call them, in the past they called them Jewish wills, because in the Jewish community, they don't want to just give the money. They want to give some instructions. I want you to go to a good school. I want you to get the education. I want you to like,
So there's more of a vision for how the
correct.
wealth being passed on
Yeah.
would be used and
Yeah.
giving some
So I
direction.
I don't see that much difference. If you want, kind of like, that's
Mm.
why I said I would divide it in three, and in the within the Christian community, a very small. Normally they say they rule 80-20. I actually have maybe less than that, maybe 10% or less, that would just give more guidance. And again, we provide the tools, and at the end of the day, the client, or the person who's doing the estate planning, has to decide. But there are other things like tax efficiency and everything, because I didn't go yet in details of all the tools, but and I'm not an accountant or a financial advisor, but as a notary public, after doing thousands of estate planning documents, I can tell you that some types of in-kind giving, because you asked me before, like, you can give cash, and some people, oh, but I don't have cash. But if you look in your assets and liabilities, you have real estate, you have securities, you have insurance products. So basically, in-kind giving, if you give to a charity in kind, and when I say in kind, I just mentioned like they're not cash, right?
Yeah.
Don't transfer into cash because you lose almost 40 to 50% taxes. And we're talking about capital gains sometimes income tax. So let's take an example. According to the Canadian tax rules, they allow us to claim a non-refundable tax credit. What that means is that you can claim the full fair market value of the gift that you give. So I'll give you a simple example. So if you donate $10,000 of securities, of shares, and you, let's say, give it to LCS, right? So you bought it for 5, now it's 10. Normally, when you take it out, you'll pay $5,000, and about 50% goes to capital gains and tax, right? So no, in this case, you're giving a tax receipt for 10,000 because you gave it $10,000 to charity. A full 10,000 is tax credit. So it's not that you're giving away more; you're actually doing it wisely. You are giving it more, and you take advantage of that tax receipt that you get for your taxes. At the end of the day, I think it's a win-win, but it's not talked enough in that. And I don't have enough money. Yes, because the cash flow is one thing, but so we have to think about capital and income, and and that's something that people need to be educated on and understand. You know, you have more, you just don't know.
Definitely. Oh, there's so many things to
So you're,
explore there. Yeah.
you are aware that less than 10% of people give after life. Um, what would you say are the reasons for that? Is it that people just don't think about it? There's no culture of it. People don't know that. They don't have enough knowledge of the tools. What would you say are the reasons why people don't, or maybe aren't as generous as they maybe could be?
Hmm.
And I'm thinking now about my parents' generation, those in their 70s and 80s who have, in many cases, a lot of wealth that they've accumulated because they bought houses, maybe in the 1980s at a fraction of what they were. And they actually are sitting on quite a few assets.
Hmm.
And um, now they're in this position where, they are planning end of life. And if, what are the opportunities there? First of all, I'm just curious generally why people aren't thinking about doing this. And then maybe the next piece to that is, how do we maybe help people be more generous
Hmm.
in the stage of life that they're at?
Well, I think I said that before, but giving is not about money. Giving is about heart. It's not a matter of pocket, right? So, and again, like we have to be careful because again, sometimes people jump ahead and they're judgmental for people because we talked about that. Maybe have a big house or a car that you may be more expensive, and people think that they're they're not giving, but they have a ton of money, right? So um so we like it's about grace. It's about you have to change the attitude about spiritual, like as we talked at the beginning, understanding where it's coming from, who is the main owner, what we're doing. And when you have that grace and when you have that understanding, the money, the giving, all that stuff comes as a bonus. You don't people can just hey, I just go to a seminar and I learned that I have to give more, right? So and even of doing their wills, like for example, I have this mantra that people logically and at the head level they understand that they need to do a will, but until that drops to your heart, until the decision it makes into the heart, then they just come and I need a will because something close happened to our family and I saw how messy it was. So I think that's about giving too.
Yeah.
So if you do understand with your heart, your faith is at that level that you understand how big of a test this will be. Somebody said in this Kingdom Advisors group, like we're talking about two questions that Jesus will ask us when we get to heaven, or God will ask us. First, what did you do, my son? So what did you do? Did you accept or not? And secondly, what did you do with what I gave you?
Mm.
And again, that may be your skills, legacy, and other things, but I believe that that's money too.
Yeah.
And those are the only two. And we know the questions for the test. So how important it is to know the
Yeah,
test in advance. So
It's
it's
to know the question in advance.
yeah.
I think about, I mean, we often think here in terms of this is a community where if you're a part of this community,
Mhm.
you believe very strongly, and we select for this. We screen for this in the families that we add to Learning Christian. You know, how willing are you within your ability to give of your time, treasures, and talent?
Yep.
And I think about treasures. And now you got me thinking on this. Your treasures, the resources that you can accumulate or earn, often are a reflection of how you invest your time and your talents.
Mhm. Not only that, I think sometimes we have that scarcity mentality as well. You asked before why, right? So why people don't give to charity more during life or in their will. And I think as your parents, sometimes that's people who grew. I learned from the 1920s, for example, their parents were going through that big recession and everything. People have that. I think it's a psychological thing, actually. People actually think that they'll die poor even if they're sitting on multi-million dollar property and they have investments and everything. It's a psychological thing, and I get it when you go through a very big recession like that in the 1920s. We as immigrants, we have from different type of scenario, but the same idea. The money was not you know abundantly. So sometimes, you have to save. You have to, when you come to a new country, you have to cut coupons and everything and save anything. But what amazes me, how we talked about that, just that little formula of how to save time. You cut coupons from the mini book and everything,
Mhm.
but you leave thousands on the table, to go to taxes that you didn't plan properly in the estate. So I think one is the lack of knowledge. When it says in the Bible, "My people die because of that,"
Yeah.
perish because of lack of knowledge. But secondly, is that mentality of scarcity. Although you don't have that much, but when you have that mentality of that widow with two copper coins, right? So if you have that abundance, like, Jesus tells us in John 10:10, you'll have the life and you'll have it from abundance. But sometimes we get caught into that scarcity mentality, and oh, but my kids, will they have enough? If I give 10% to charity, or if I give this to, like, or will they be covered? And again, it's obviously there is, people normally give to spouse first, then children if they're not in a blended family. But then after that, like, that's at least as a, we call it common accident. If something happens, and even if you don't put the charity, how that joke that, somebody named, had a daughter, had named her Charity, and he was bragging that he gave everything to charity when he died, right? So anyway, so I think is having that mentality of abundance helps a lot.
Yeah. How do you take that vision from head to heart? What examples have you seen in terms of vision statements or legacy, faithful kind of statements in wills and estates that you worked
Because
with?
one of the things we do know is we do know that the seminars and the workshops and stuff like that, whether it's financial planning or parenting or any other things that we sometimes do as a school community to equip people, they don't really change people's minds or hearts.
Yeah.
They are most impactful for the people who are already going
Mm.
there curious
Mhm.
about their heads made up,
Mhm.
their hearts set. They just want to know, how do I do this?
Yeah,
But we're not really changing
I
anybody's
agree.
mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it's head to
Well, they
heart
may
and
change. They may change. I've had a few seminars with churches, and I really want to do that more because I'm really passionate about Christians being more alert about this, like estate planning and everything, because I think we're sloppier than, people who don't believe in life after life, right? So then they plan this really well because this is it, right? And Christians, which is, oh, we just had a will 20 years ago, and our kids are really get along, and we'll just leave it. They'll decide what to do. And they, you know so I think when they a few people who came to these presentations, they changed their mind a little bit, but still at their mind level, right? So you ask me how it goes from the head to the heart. I think two things. One thing is the personal experience. If you had a neighbor or a friend or your parents that went through something, you don't even need my information. You'll just run to me and say, we need a will in the next month, 100%, because I don't want my family to go through that, right? That's one. It also helps when I have in my seminars all the case law that I bring and I explain, and this is your neighbor. This is your somebody, you could even recognize somebody in these cases. This is not fairy tales. Nowadays, there's somebody in court fighting for that, and I have like tons of situations where the family was all okay, and then when for a little thing, sometimes it's not even much money that they're fighting for.
Yeah.
So those case law sometimes helps, but personal experience 100%.
Yeah.
And the second thing is, I would say what we said at the beginning, an encounter with God. Like when you have a deep encounter with God, and when you understand that we're blessed beyond measure, you cannot not be generous. Like how much we Christians should be the most generous, because how much we are given, and we're given like eternal life. We cannot pay for our sins and for anything that we've done. So to not be generous with whatever little we are given, even if you have millions, that's pennies next to the eternity that we are given. So that's why when you get deeper and you understand what the faith really means, is not just going on Sunday to church, but Monday to Sunday and Sunday to Monday again, to just go and live out and see how my faith transpires into giving, into helping, into volunteering, and so forth.
Yeah. I wonder if we can get super practical here now, Lilian, in
Yeah.
terms of what might a family do as they show up to visit with you. They've got an appointment scheduled. They say, help us through our will. Maybe we've got families here with young kids. They've got a
Mhm.
couple of kids. How do they start to think about either taking that will and then really applying some of the things that you've instructed us with
Mhm.
here? What does the vision look like? What do the practices look like? Maybe walk us through that kind of experience. Obviously, we're getting a lot of value of you being here, and this is the
Hopefully.
yeah,
Well, and I want to make it clear that we're not doing this, and I didn't pay you
yeah,
or
for
something.
sure.
This is not ad for my services.
Yeah,
And look, everybody has their own notary lawyer, and hopefully, any family would have somebody in their family.
mhm,
They don't have to come to our office or uh, go to anybody. It's just find somebody, because the estate planning is misunderstood, and there are legal professionals that will just kind of do a will, power of attorney, representation agreement. It's a quick half an hour meeting, and I, because of the Kingdom Advisor training, and I don't want to do the quick and kind of like, I've done those before when the person is in the hospital and dying, and I had to do a will like last minute kind of thing, and but in the normal situation, I would say we send a questionnaire before. It's a very extensive questionnaire, but we say skip through the questions that you don't know, because we'll have a meeting anyways and we'll talk about those things. But the heart of estate planning is doing a family tree and understanding their specific situations, and then do the assets and liabilities. So we can also help save some probate fees, other taxes, as we talked before. Is there's a lot of money on the table, and in average we save people about $10,000 to $15,000 on an average family income, that just by reshuffling things in their portfolios and just give them some advice. And at the end of the day is their decision what they decide to do. But in the meeting, we answer the questions, we plan the documents, and we also the will. We have a few blog articles about the will being just a small piece of the puzzle. The estate planning includes how you get registered on title. Are you joint tenants of your wife, or you are just yourself because you are in business, or it's just her? So we have few situations this year that there was $20,000 to $50,000 extra expenses because they were not registered correctly on the title. He had a stroke, and things just rolled. It went down from there, right? So that's why I would suggest when they choose a legal professional, to make sure they do a comprehensive estate plan, not just making a will, because the will may not actually accomplish the goal. And like in that case of the gift of shares, right? So if you die, almost everything becomes taxable again. right? So then by reshuffling and planning, first of all, you save money, taxes, and other things, but also you make it easier for your family later on.
Mm,
So that might describe the most common demographic in our school community.
yeah.
Roughly 600 and almost 700 families in our school community. Probably most ranging from late 20s to early 50s is that demographic where, yeah, they're probably thinking I need a will and may have one. But we also have this other demographic, the generational families, alumni families, grandparents who are in their 70s, in their 80s, and they are thinking maybe a little bit differently about their finances. And they're thinking about the affordability crisis that everybody's aware of in our communities. And they're thinking about how do I help continue make Christian education
Hmm.
accessible?
Hmm.
Tell us, or maybe talk to us a little bit about how do we help our parents' generation, the generation of the grandparents in our school community?
Mm.
How do we help them maybe think in kingdom ways about planning their finances? What are some of the tools, and maybe what are some of the questions that they might want to be asking if they're not asking them already?
Hmm. No, that's a great question. And we get that a lot because, when you're young, your problem is to make more money to support your family. When you're in that age, when you're a grandparent and you sit on a hopefully a pile of gold, but you worked hard your whole life, it is still a problem. People laugh, but it is still a problem because you don't want everything to be wasted. And imagine that you have RRSP or RIFs after a certain age, and people are not advised properly, and they keep it. Although there's some penalties if you keep it too long, but then you die, and then half of it goes to tax. And unless it goes to your spouse or disabled child, that's the only way that it's a tax-free rollover. If not, your wife died and now you're by yourself and you still have that tree for a few 100,000. Like you think you have 500, but you actually have 250 because that's 100% will be taxed. Well, not 100%. It's 100% will be 50% taxed.
Yeah, that's right.
So it for surely will be taxed, and it's again like I think when Jesus was asked what to do, he said he showed the coin and he said what is on the coin is the emperor. So give the Caesar what's Caesar. So we are called to pay the taxes, and I think Canada is mostly blessed because of the tax part because we have all the amenities and all that to pay. But yeah, I think God gives us also the book to see the wisdom how to do it properly. So pay Caesar what is Caesar, but if you just leave the money on the table because you didn't plan, Caesar will take it all. so
So you
so
didn't say give it all to Caesar. It's just give
yeah,
part.
I don't think Jesus said that. Give the whole thing to Caesar. Give just that part of the coin that has his face on it.
You've spoken a bit to a couple key biblical passages, and you've also given us a number of different practices. I think one of the tensions that I'm hearing raised in our conversation is whether to be that good and faithful servant or that legacy leaving servant. And I think what you're maybe suggesting is that you can be a bit of both. And there's a lot of discernment of holding those two things together to be faithful because God has been faithful to us, and to be generous because God has been generous to us. And so, as we start to think of even some possible implications that come up with being too generous, is there ever a point where we could get to say, all right, that's actually too far, that blessing might not actually be a blessing at the end of the day? Or should we just let loose with our giving, Lillian?
You kept the hardest question to the end.
Yeah.
So let me ask you back. So the widow that gave two coins, which were everything she had, was that unwise or not? Were the lady who broke that alabaster vessel and just washed Jesus's feet, or so you're thinking about like sometimes you read and you say that was a waste, but there was somebody else in the Bible who said it's a waste.
Yeah.
That was Judas. So
Mm.
so are we thinking like Judas? And
Or even like the Pharisees.
that's
Side by
right.
side. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think so. I think sometimes you have to. we call it sacrificial giving, but again, the only word sacrificial I can assign to Jesus's uh, job on the cross. Otherwise, there's not, Paul talks in Hebrews about like you have not, you know, done this to the blood, or, like you've not even sacrificed much, like you think you do that, but it's like the word sacrificial, when you say sacrificial giving, you just gave more than you thought you'll give yesterday, right? So that's what normally means. But I think each family, they have to decide what those two copper coins mean in their family. They know better their financials, right? And I know we talk about the middle school campaign, and that, like maybe some people, like they asked in church, and then they have other organizations that they help, and here's the middle school campaign. But as long as they are not making this school their family, and that's their community, which I that's how I approach this. If When you get the network of the people and the parents and alumni that they say, this is my home, even if when they graduate, they have my kids graduated and they come to do the LCS camp because they love this community. They keep coming back. So that's what we want. When you have that, it's your family. Then when the family is in trouble, when they have to rebuild it or do something, it's not about I don't have enough. I have a copper coin. Here it is, LCS, right? Where I have two copper coins. So as long as that approach and mentality is, as I said, it's back to the heart first, change of heart first, the money will follow.
Mm.
And I think, I do think this is an opportunity. It's a big opportunity. This middle school will be built either with your coin or not. And I'm looking at you, Kevin. I'm not kind of, but I'm looking at Adam too, and I'm looking at everybody who's listening, right? So this will be built, and it's being built already. If you look behind us, like it's there, and in 2 years we'll have kids already studying and playing sports. It will happen either with your coin or not. But will you take this opportunity to actually be part of this and say later on proudly that I was part of that? I gave $100 a month, or I gave just $1,000 for the whole process, and that's still acceptable. Because, and I like how you guys change from this is because it's a little bit daunting to see how many millions we still have to fundraise. But when you say no, we have 260 families out of how many, Adam? 600.
Yeah, 687, I think, enrolled
So
this year.
our goal should be that all 600 families would give something.
Yeah.
Give $100, as I said, per month for a year, or give whatever, sacrifice. If you want sacrificial giving, sacrifice your coffee, your Starbucks coffee, and put like $10 a day, and see that's already $300 a month. So if you do that for a year, that's more than $3,000. That's what, 5,000.
That reminds me of a conversation we had. We had 3 generations of LCS graduates in this room a couple weeks ago, and we talked about the early days of LCS, the 1960s, and how they built the first school, and how they purchased the property that the elementary school is on, and all these conversations. And in that time, their identity was, we just do this because that's who we are. They talked about how they refinanced their house once to come up with $1,000, and everybody did that. It's because that's just what they did.
Sold cows and other things.
Yes, and then a year later, that was buying the property, and then a year later they had to actually build the school, and they all did it again. They all refinanced their house again. We're in different times. We know that. I wonder about, as you're talking about some of these things, I wonder about the role of identity. And I think about like my parents' generation, and so many my parents, people that I know that are in my parents' generation. Yeah, they didn't grow up during the Depression, but they heard the stories of their parents growing up in the Depression.
Yeah.
And that shaped them. And now they're in their 70s and 80s. And it's really interesting, the conversations I have with some of those folks, because they are very wealthy on paper, but they see themselves and they talk about themselves as they're poor, or they're working class, or they don't identify with giving their money away. That's what rich people do, even though they are, by all intents and purposes, wealthy. And I think about one of the strongest objections in some of our conversations so far about the middle school project has been, well, this is for somebody else. That we're not wealthy people. That's for the other people to do, not us. it strikes me that wealth has nothing to actually do with, I am testing this theory. It doesn't really have a whole lot to do with what's in your bank account. It has way more to do with your identity and how you see yourself.
I I'm totally with you, and a few thoughts came into my mind. First of all, the mentality of scarcity that we said. So if you're, you know, the paper says that you're wealthy, although you're maybe have your lifestyle at some level, right? Because the Kingdom Advisor, when they're talking about, they say the first thing is to cut off a little bit your lifestyle, because that's not necessarily you don't have to go on vacation and you have to do all, but sometimes there's stuff that it's not necessary, and you can do that instead of like. But if you have a high lifestyle, you make 200,000 a year, you'll spend 200,000. Yes, you're poor because you keep your lifestyle at the or the expenses at that level, and you make $500,000 a year, you'll spend it all too if there are no priorities put in place. But the second thing is you said about his identity, right? So uh, if you are at LCS and you think as a tenant, I'm just bringing these kids here, I'm just getting education, it's paper, it's a transactional, right? So, and I think that's what could be the problem in the future. We're growing, the school becomes bigger, we have parents that they appreciate what we give. We have a product, it's a prime product in the educational. I'm not even talking about Christian community. The more I'm on the board, I learn how much blessing is for the families. Yes, we have to work on the community to be stronger, because the more we grow, we still have to work on that. But I think as long as the identity will come, hey, I'm an owner, I'm a shareholder in this venture,
Mm.
I'm not a tenant. Because if you have the tenant attitude, I'm just bringing the kid, take them back at 3 o'clock, and I'm just gone. Like, why do I care about building a middle school? And I'm not talking about like our children are mostly out of the school, especially the middle and elementary. Why do I care? I care because of identity again, like who I am as a Christian, who I am as like just the legacy. Yes, you may be paying forward, so we're called to give back. We're talking about the generation that you're talking about having more, but they don't know how to help. So giving back, or the young families paying forward. Maybe you're paying forward, especially for your kids that will be here at middle school. Have you thought about, making sure that they have a good, program, and they have, projects and not a product, but that's our product, to provide them with a good education, some activities, extracurricular. So I do believe that when that identity changes from a tenant to I'm a owner and I'm a shareholder, then I'm a partner with Christ in this building. And I'm just, if I'm a partner, where is my share? Because when you are a partner, we have to have some shareholder agreements and say, well, you own 1% in LCS. So where is your share, right?
So your identity then becomes owner, investor versus just a consumer or a customer.
That's right. And if you ask me, well, where is my share when I sell all this, right? Well, that's why the kingdom comes, right? So if Jesus says, build this in the other kingdom, not this one that can rot and can get bad,
Mhm.
or the whole stock kind of collapses, and stock market, and you just lost it, right? We lived in Moldova in the 90s, and you can Google to see exactly how many percent, but the inflation went over 1,000%, I think. So we had we had my grandparents who had their saving for life, and they didn't have much. I think they have like 20,000 rubles at that time or whatever, right? So they became $20. So we haven't had that, and we even 1920s, maybe that was close to that. People didn't have jobs and everything. So saying it that we're poor right now, it's a scarcity mentality. And I heard the stats like a few years back. It could change, but at that time they said if you make at least 60,000 a year, you're in the 3% richest population in the world. So if you do that, and you're not the, again, I'm keeping going back to the widow of the two copper coins, then she didn't have the scarcity. Even she gave two copper coins, and that was 100% of her income. and revenue. So that's what I would like to kind of bring up when the people are saying that this is not for us, then maybe LCS is not for them. Maybe they should go in the public school and have it for free then, right? But here, just if you look at even transactionally, you come here, you're getting a prime education. Yes, you're paying the tuition, but there's so many more opportunities that they can be blessed. I'm not even saying about transactional, but just being blessed. So, but it's their own encounter with God, how deep the cross goes into their being, because I think the deeper the cross goes into your spirit, the more blessing come out, because then it's not just a encounter one time when you raised your hand that you became a Christian. It becomes much more than that.
Yeah, I really appreciate that shift from a transactional view to one that's transformational. And you're inviting a participation amongst generations that have given to this community and made it possible for us to be here. So as you even invite Adam and I to think more and more about that with our families, as we have kids here at the school, as we see more and more of what God's vision actually looks like, yeah, we invite our families into this community that's going to shape them. It's going to connect them. It's going to help them to think differently about thriving and what God has given them in terms of gifts and
Absolutely.
resources and talents. And hopefully, as we've had this conversation today, equipping them to do more of this work together with one another, as our TTT really is about doing this work together. That the small investments, the large investments, they work in collaboration with one another so that people get connected to the school's mission that will hopefully continue long past our kids being in the school and for generations. So, is there anything else that we should have asked you about, Lillian?
I think it's like what you asked me about the call, like what I can, ask people where I can see our LCS community in 2030, or
Yeah.
because we're working now on our vision and everything. And I see a picture of a thriving, mature community. I think we still have something to work on, but I think the only thing we can work on is like provide that environment that people can see that there's their home. This is their home, right?
Mm.
If we can have that community, maybe a few more events for parents to connect, and because it's again like a big church, sometimes they need small groups, right? So the same with LCS, the more events that can bring the alumni together again, bring the grandparents together, like just have some groups that will kind of see, hey, this is us, even if we're graduated, but it's us. And so that community, I think, will help people have this sense of ownership, so to speak. And generosity is the fuel that moves us forward. And as I said, it's not just financially, but in time, prayer, mentorship, be on the board, do other things, donate your time. And so my invitation to those listening, the new middle schools will be built, as I said, but I invite you to join us on this campaign and invest in the kingdom. It's for the kingdom in general, but it's for their own spiritual growth as well. So let's not miss this moment. Let's pray, give, act, and as Adam said, today, tomorrow, together.
Yeah. Amen. Thank you so much, Lillian, for sharing with us, for inviting our families to be shaped by this community and to see that shaping continue across generations where God has been faithful and is faithful and will continue to be faithful well beyond these buildings
Yeah.
and these people here. So really grateful for the opportunity to connect with you, and our listeners can write back to us and connect with us if they have any more questions. They can reach us at podcast@langleychristian.com, and grateful for the engagement as we continue to think about the Langley Christian of 2030 and perhaps even beyond.
Yeah, it was my pleasure, and thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.